We start this evening's meeting recognizing those from administration that are present.
Mayor Jamie Slutes. Here. Chief Counsel Earl Wise Jr. Here. Director of Development Ted Hernkane.
Here.
Is there anyone from administration I missed? That's it, President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Diane. And let the record show that Councilman Ed Lewis, Councilman John Packley, and Councilman Eric Ray are all absent this evening. All had reported off previously. All right, let's get started with community development.
Thank you,
Mrs.
Mr.
Creamer.
Craig. I don't have anything old or new, but I do want to make an announcement that Monday, March 17th at 6 p.m. at Massillon City Council Chambers, there will be an annual action plan. There will be a meeting. Let me read this. Ted sent me something that's really small. The City of Massillon is currently preparing a community development document that involves funding the city receives from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. The annual action plan, which is July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026, describes the specific activities the city will undertake during the year to spend CDBG funds. So there is a public hearing next Monday at 6 o'clock here in Chambers, and he would ask me to make that announcement. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Would Mr. Hernkane like to come up and give us some more information?
Thank you. Good evening. I don't have a whole lot of information other than every year when we submit our annual action plan for the CDBG program year beginning July 1st, we have two public meetings. If you remember last year, we had the two consultants. We will not have them this year. You're stuck with me, and it'll probably be a little less exciting. But the first meeting is to engage comments from the public on strategies, activities, planning for the next program year. We will have another one in April when the action plan is made available for the 30-day comment period. So it's a standard thing that we do this time of year in preparation of that document.
Has this meeting on Monday, the 17th, been advertised?
It was in the newspaper today, yes.
Any questions from council?
I just want to be clear. So for those nonprofit entities that would apply for CDBG funds,
Correct.
they would submit their proposal or their request for the city to review and then determine if they're granted funds and dollar amounts,
Yes.
correct? All right. Are there any, you probably haven't, have you started receiving?
We have.
requests?
We received them last week.
Okay, because I know, I keep hearing about transportation for seniors, and I know I think we have one entity now that offers services and childcare. So I didn't know if there was any additional, hopefully, submissions that would address those two concerns, at least in my ward. I just want to make that a public.
I believe we have, yes. We've received the same applications from our current subrecipients. We've also received 2 or 3 additional ones from new entities, and we're currently reviewing those to see if they're eligible. There is on the city's website, under the Community Development tab, a survey. It's 4 or 5 questions that folks can log into, tell us what ward they live in, and it kind of ranks all the programs and activities and allows them to click which ones that they feel are the most pertinent to them or their neighborhood.
Is that information, has that been publicized also?
It wasn't in the notice, but it is on the website, and this is starting our process that's going to go till the middle of May. There are some new HUD rules that usually in the past we've submitted our annual action plan by the May 15th deadline. HUD made a rule earlier or at the end of last year that they're not accepting action plans until the final allocation is approved by Congress. We'll see what that looks like this week. I'm not going to hold my breath. I think this is going to be one of those years where we're going to continue to follow the same planning process that we do every year, but our submission may not be till later in the summer, depending on what that actual allocation is. This is going to be an interesting one, I'll tell you that.
Okay. Thank you.
But we're going to continue with our same, again, we're going to continue with our same process, and when we actually submit the document, we will. But thank you for making a note of that.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else for community development.
All right, thank you. Economic Development, Mrs. Harwick Smith, you're the only one here from that committee.
There's nothing new for economic development.
All right, Health, Welfare, and Building Regulations, Councilwoman Cunningham.
That's me. We'll have Mr. Wise go up to the microphone.
Sarita, your microphone, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wise, if you go to the microphone, please. All right. From last week with the first readings of these 4 in a row here that we have, there were some additional questions asked. Do you have any of those answers by any chance?
I listened to the committee meeting, and there were 4 amendments made. I'm prepared somewhat to talk about those. I don't know the specific questions that you're referring to, if there were.
Julie, did you had a question, and so did Jill, correct? Last week on those? Or
Well, let me-
it was just the amendments?
I did have an opportunity to speak with Mrs. Creamer, Councilwoman Creamer, and I understand, I think, what the situation is with some situations in her ward, maybe other places as well, where there were trucks parked along the street with kind of scrap metal just sitting in the bed of the truck. She thinks there's still one out there and going to give me a location to take a look at. I don't know, haven't looked at that specifically under the IPMC, but that may be something that we could handle under that. If not, we could certainly sit down with Edmund and Mr. Assistant Law Director Mack and Mr. Hernkane and come up with some potential proposal if we feel that needs to be addressed at this point. That's what I understand with regard to that. Now, again, whether that would go in 302 or 304, I'm not sure, garbage and rubbish or kind of the general code. With regard to the 4 amendments, I can speak generally to those and then field some questions unless there's some other question unrelated to those 4 at this point. With regard to that, and I'll say this about all these, the International Property Maintenance Code, as we all understand, is a generalized code put together by the ICC, the International Code Council. I knew I would forget exactly what that means. But it's basically a nationwide system, and it's implemented by hundreds of cities. It's a code that has been tested in court. Sometimes the wording doesn't sound quite right, but I don't know how much law you've read, but a lot of laws sound that way. And you have to write a general code to cover kind of the gamut, where if you write something too specific and narrow it down, then you create gaps that you can't then enforce or prevent those things that you want to prevent. You can't also be too general, because then the exceptions swallow the rule, or maybe that's the other way around. But let me turn to what I think is probably the easiest one. That's the second proposal about the appeal. The 20 days to 30 days sounds like a good idea. It's easy to change. The $100 fee from, I think, the law, well, speak for myself, I think it's good to have that fee. The administration wants that fee. If we find that that becomes a problem, we can address that at some later point. And as it relates to all of them, this is brand new. And it's been implemented for 2 weeks, maybe, a week or two. From the law director's or law department's perspective, we'd like to give it a chance. let's not get too deep into the weeds on some of these things and make changes that might not work out for us. If we find there's a problem, emphasizing if we find there's a problem, we can always go back and adjust. The whole code enforcement system is to try to correct things by talking to people. Hey, you know, your spouting is loose. We had a complaint about this car in your driveway. I don't have this experience, but my guess is that code enforcement doesn't go out and write somebody up for a misdemeanor or for a fine unless it's really an outrageous or dangerous situation. They talk to the individuals. You know, hey, we got this complaint. Can you do something about that? Yeah. And they go away and come back in a month and there's still a problem, you know, a little more emphasis, or maybe write a notice at that point. And under the codes, the IPMC, they write a violation or a notice. They have 30 days to fix it. They go back out. Hopefully it's taken care of. No one in code enforcement or in the law department or in any part of the administration wants to fine anybody or wants to charge somebody with any type of criminal offense. The purpose is to have those things available. First you talk to somebody, oh yeah, I didn't even realize that was hanging down. I fix it. Good to go. Or if you have somebody with some resistance, then the enforcement or the negative incentive is there. And understanding that there are going to be some issues, that the fines and the misdemeanors are for those situations where we really have a persistent and consistent problem. And you know, you can say, well, we want to get the big landlords, and that's good if they're a problem, or a small landlord if they're a problem, or an individual residence if they have some dangerous item or some issue. But from our perspective, let's give this a chance. Now, and if anybody has questions, obviously you're free to, this is your venue, you're free to interrupt me. But let me turn to the first proposal was on 107.4. Those fines, I didn't think that there was any issue with the fines at this point. Again, the code enforcement goes out, they talk to someone. If there becomes a persistent problem, then they issue the notice. They've got 30 days to correct, and then they have the fine. If they go back out, and are they going to go back out in 30 days? I don't know. My guess is maybe they'll go out in 35 days or 40 days. And if the person says, hey, I'm working on this, that 30 days is not necessarily going to be cut in stone. You know, they're willing to work with people. Hey, we'll extend this first notice for another 15 days or 30 days. That's the way it works, is my understanding. If they have a problem, they can speak with their council people. They can come to public speaks nights and, you know, or talk to the mayor's office. And those problems, if they're legitimate problems, I shouldn't put it that way, if they're problems that anyone feels that code enforcement is out of their lane or going too far, those things can be addressed. If there becomes a problem, or if there's a problem with the code 6 months from now or a year from now, we do a big review, change those things. I'm not saying we shouldn't change some things now, but I don't want to get too far down that road before we've not had any problems or not really implemented it. Each day is a separate violation. As it stands right now, as it's written, it's just under item number 4. I think that just applies to a potential criminal charge. I think that it's been said before, but that's in many, many, many codes. Each day is a separate violation. Now, if it's been 30 days, is someone going to get charged with 30 misdemeanors? No. Or if they do, it's going to be a enforcement type thing. The fine goes up, those types of things. I'm going to move from that section to what is the legislative request number 3, 302.8, motor vehicles. Let me, as I understood it, there was an issue with the word inoperative. In the IPMC, specifically Chapter 2, Section 202, there's 3 pages of definitions. And the word inoperable is defined in that definition. So 302.8, motor vehicles except as provided for in other regulations, inoperative or unlicensed motor vehicles shall not be parked, and it goes on. That's the 302.8, inoperative or unlicensed. I submit to you that the real operative word there, no pun intended, is inoperative. Because the definition of inoperative motor vehicle is a vehicle that cannot be driven upon the public streets for any reason, including but not limited to it being unlicensed, wrecked, abandoned, in a state of disrepair, or incapable of being moved under its own power. So in the code section where it says inoperative or unlicensed, unlicensed is kind of almost a throw-in because it's defined as inoperative motor vehicle can be one that's unlicensed. This is a separate section than 521.13. They're similar. It's a different section. It's for a different purpose. It's enforced by either the health department and/or the police department. I don't think we should, and I don't think this was the final discussion, we shouldn't simply eliminate 302.8 from the IPMC. That gives the code enforcement a separate enforcement agency, the people that are going to be out there seeing the motor vehicles. If the police see them, we don't really want the police, unless it becomes a real issue, involved in that type of thing, in my opinion. Code enforcement is out there. If they have this IPMC code, they have that. It's enforceable. They can use it. I think with the definition of inoperable motor vehicle, I think that makes it a little more clear for the example where if it doesn't have wheels or if it's up on blocks. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but what if that happens? This is the specific general section where if it's too specific, then we can't cover that really bad, unusual situation where it has no hood and no doors and no trunk and it's a hazard. So I think that that's a good section to have. If in fact it becomes a huge problem, I would suggest we watch it, we look at it, and we make amendments or changes to it if it becomes a problem. I think as written, it looks a bit odd, but when you look at definitions of words and think about, hey, we can't be too specific, we can't be too general, this covers situations. And if you have a situation that's not a problem now, but it becomes a problem, like the painting, okay, we've never had that problem. Well, what if a year from now or 6 months from now or 2 years from now it becomes that problem? Then you can address that, potentially, and you have it under this. I think I have that one. I will move to this other one, and then I'll field any of your questions now, but I'll do this and then pause here. The fourth one, the bulk pickup, I shouldn't say I don't see any issues. I have one, and I'll point it out. I don't see anything in the IPMC or haven't read anything that would potentially cover that. So potentially a good amendment. I say all these things. Of course, it's your decision. The only thing I will say about that is I would take out the word non-organic. Again, organic is not defined in the code, or non-organic, so you go to a dictionary. That's something that comes from a living organism, something that's carbon-based. And if you go back to Chapter 2, the definition, it defines rubbish as wood, tree trimmings, coal. Those are things that are certainly organic. So that's a tiny little silly note, but I would take that word out if you're considering that amendment. Rubbish is defined, garbage is defined, they're two different things. Garbage is the waste from animal or vegetable waste from preparing food, pretty specific. And then rubbish is kind of pretty much everything else. So I hate to be pedantic and long-winded, but that's my general take on the IPMC, those amendments. As I indicated, I did have a conversation with Councilwoman Creamer about a situation that I didn't understand. And I am happy to field any questions, but also Edmund, Assistant Law Director Mack, and myself would be happy to meet with anybody at any time for the next preparation for the next committee meeting. I'll take a breath.
Councilman Gregg?
Thank you, Councilwoman Cunningham. Mr. Wise, I appreciate all the information you've given us. I am not an attorney. I certainly don't spend time reading laws. So I'm very much happy to rely on your expertise and your recommendations regarding these amendments. So just so I understand, it sounds like each of these ordinances, number 7-2025, 8-2025, 9, and 10-2025, these are all amendments to the IPMC. It sounds like, I know you said it's our decision, and I understand that, but it sounds like you think the IPMC would be fine without these amendments. Is that correct?
Yes, there's certainly some tweaks.
Yeah.
Like I said, on the appeal, I think the 30 days instead of 20 is probably a good idea.
And I, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
And that's the one I'm thinking, I agree with that as well, that the 30 days would be fine. What I wouldn't support is eliminating the fine. I agree, I think we need the fine, we need to keep the teeth in the ordinance and the ability to use it if we need it.
I'll be a bit pedantic. It's a fee.
Fee, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
So
Okay.
not a fine to
Fee.
to appeal. Yeah.
Right. The others, I think what you said makes a lot of sense, that we don't want to be too specific, we don't want to be too general. Again, the IPMC has been tested throughout the country, so I think the only amendment that I see necessary, I agree with removing the word rubbish. I think that makes that one a little bit.
Well, non-organic. I think rubbish is.
Right, I'm
okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
The organic, non-organic. That makes that ordinance a little ambiguous. But other than that, I think the IPMC is as good as it stands, and I would support those couple minor amendments, but these major changes, I don't.
The final one, the bulk pickup, I simply don't know if we currently have an ordinance that covers that, or if there's some other section that I haven't seen in the IPMC that would limit the time that something like that can be put out. So that one I don't know, and I would hope that we could,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I've seen in the past, there was a time frame, like you couldn't put your trash out prior to like 6 o'clock the previous day, and had to be, your barrels had to be put away by 6 o'clock the next day. So I don't recall exactly the timing, but there was something in our codes that covered that. But if not, I'm okay with this amendment to the code. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs.
So-
Hardwick Smith?
Yeah, so ordinance number 7, if someone has already paid their fines, or they haven't paid it when that goes into effect,
I'm sorry, we're on 107.
107,
Point
number
four.
7, 2025.
Oh, yes, the ordinance. I apologize.
So that one, where they're guilty of a first-degree misdemeanor, and each day afterwards is a separate offense.
Correct.
So if they wrote someone up and they had 5 violations, they're going to get fined for each violation, correct?
They could, yes.
And then if they didn't pay their violations, then it's a misdemeanor, plus they still owe all the fines, plus with this, each day being a separate offense, they could be charged like for 5 more misdemeanors every single day.
Potentially.
So they could go to court and they could have, if 30 days go by, they could have 150 misdemeanors?
Yes, but let me tell you, that would never happen. You can't get someone in jail on thefts, those types of things. There's not jail space. And I don't want to, first of all, they don't have to be charged.
Then why do we have it?
Well,
So they can be, but I mean, that's severe. I mean, so to me, if you're gonna do this and we say, oh, we're not gonna do this to anybody, we're not gonna do this to anybody, and then we do this to certain people that we know are problems, then they're gonna be like, I was targeted and I had to do this and nobody else had to do this,
well,
and I was charged with this. I mean, so then how do we handle that? And then the city's in a lawsuit?
well, it would potentially be a criminal case, and each case, you have to judge on its own circumstances. Someone is walking out of a store and they have merchandise in their pocket. Well, did they forget they were looking for their keys and they put the thing in their pocket? Is this the 7th time they've walked out of the store with the, I don't know, something in their pocket? I can't think of a little widget. Who in code enforcement wants to charge somebody with a misdemeanor? Nobody. They're going to be working towards this. Is this the first time that I haven't fixed my spouting? Is this the 7th time I've left dangerous implements in my driveway that kids have gotten hurt on? It's a gamut of circumstances, and there's going to be discretion. And that is the case in every criminal case. And again, in this case, you don't even have to charge them with a crime. You fine them. You send the notice, they get a fine. 30 days, you get 30 more days to fix it. If not, then you get a higher fine. And you get to $500 and nothing happens. It depends upon the level of harm, whether it's safe, whether it's a repeat offender, those types of things. And I don't mean to belittle this, but if you're going 45 in a 35 zone, the police stop you. Well, they don't have to give you a ticket. They can, certainly. They can give you a ticket going, can't remember the speed limit I gave, 37. They're going to warn you, those types of things. That type of discretion, you're never going to get away from. And if you don't have the serious penalty with serious repercussions for the long-time violators or the very, very serious, and I can't come up with a good example, violation that is dangerous or hazardous, then you can't say, okay, boy, this is really bad. Let's go back and amend this ordinance to include this. You're too late. You've missed that opportunity. We have this misdemeanor each day as a violation in, and I don't think I brought it, at least 3 code sections that I could find. Has anyone ever been charged under that? I don't know. I know we had a civil suit filed in common pleas court where it wasn't a violation of criminal offense, but racked up tens of thousands of dollars of fines, and the person came in and sold the property and, settled the case for something less than the $25,000 in fines. But the $25,000 in fine got him to answer, got him to come in, got him to say, what's going on here? Because under those circumstances, which we can here too, not in the criminal arena, but we can assess those penalties and those fines against the taxes or against the property, as we've done here recently. So that's if it becomes a problem, and we say this is not what we intended, we have the time to change that. That works. Because of this language, which is, you read that, and I'm used to it. I mean, I see that in a lot of cases. I was in the prosecutor's office for 8 years. It's kind of startling when you see it, but that's not at all unusual. And at times it works.
So looking at other people's laws and their fines, and I mean, we had very small fines before, now we have very big fines. What is it, 250, 350, 500, and then everything can accumulate and become misdemeanors if you don't take care of it. The concern too is like, you go through certain, so, you know, like if they have a minor violation, it might only be a $25 fine or a $50 fine, and they gotta take care if they don't take care of it. Ours goes right to it, like, as far as severity, it's the same fine for everyone now, no matter how minor the offense or how severe the offense, for each violation, the way we have this written. And it's just, it could be a lot of little things, and just concerns me too. I mean, going back to the other one, so this 107.4, this isn't part of the IPMC. We made that, we didn't make that up. I'm assuming Mr. Mack wrote all that and changed everything separate. That's not part of the IMPC as far as like 107.4 where we added all those. And we went along with the ingredient, and I just feel like if there really is, like even other things when I was reading, like a process for appeal, they can, you know, if they disagree with the fine or if they have a problem with code enforcement, they can go to they can appeal to the safety service director. Now, I don't think it's going to be appeal, like other people were saying, but I don't think you really get that many people that show up, but I think if someone is really upset, that they should be able to appeal it and not have, when they already got all these big fines, at least be able to go in and appeal it, and we don't have to take another $100 there, because that defers people, other than they're going to go badmouth the city everywhere, but we're, instead of, okay, they want to come in, speak their mind, yeah, but we hear you, we'll take that, maybe, you know what, we still agree with our code enforcement, and you got to pay your fines. Fine, and then he pays all their fines. But to charge them that extra $100 just to say, you know, because they want to make an appeal, I felt that should be removed, because I think it closes communication. We just dumped, 50 pages of laws in small print, smaller than normal print, on our community, and people don't even know if they're in violation of something or not.
Well, they will.
Yeah, they
Long
will.
before- Long before they get to this stage,
Yeah.
the code enforcement will say, hey, you've got this issue.
But it might even be like with the first one, or maybe even when they talk to them and there isn't even a fine involved, they want to go talk to someone about it, And it decreases communication to know if we are working or not, if we don't even allow people to do that. Now, if they want to fight it and we go through with it, then they are. I mean, they're going to court. They're getting an attorney, they're appealing, they're going to have their fines if they're still guilty, plus they're going to have all their court costs. But I just thought that gave them a break, but I guess if nobody feels that we don't want to hear what anybody has to say unless they pay for it.
Councilman Brian Huth?
Thank you, Councilwoman Cunningham. We do want to hear from the people. So the first line is communication. The first line isn't citation. So code enforcement is not knocking on someone's door, complaint driven, not by chance, but because someone is concerned that the surrounding area of their home and their community is a threat to their health and their safety. So code enforcement walks up, knocks on the door, hey, Betty Sue, how are you? What's happening? Do you know that this is a problem? Do you know that these resources exist? How can we help you? They give such a time to fix and mitigate the problem, help her with the resources, come back and see what's happening. I'm not in code enforcement. I couldn't tell you the percentage of times that that's the story that they have to tell, but I think our community is a pretty good place to be. I think our citizens want to live in happy, healthy houses with happy, healthy neighbors. The issues of the bad seeds, the ones who are causing the problem, the ones who don't give a hoot about their neighbor, or about their community. And those are the people that we need to have teeth against because they're not going to listen. They're just not, and they haven't. And that's been shown throughout our history.
Mr. Gregg, Councilman Gregg?
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. Mrs. Hardwick-Smith, I have all respect for everything you've done on this and your thoughts and concerns, but I got to disagree with the $100 fee. I don't believe that will decrease communication at all. They've got plenty of time before they get to that point to talk it over with code enforcement, with the law department, with the city administration, and none of that they're not charged for any of that. That's all free. It's if they want to go to the next level where they want to repeal, that's been discussed, it's been looked at, and it's been deemed that they're still in violation, and they want to go the next step to try and alleviate from that violation, then there's a $100 fee, which I don't think is prohibitive for anybody, especially a landlord. And keep in mind, we don't want this hammer for the individual homeowners. We want the ability for them to discuss and work it out, and that's what I know from experience for people in my ward, that's the way code enforcement handles it. They don't walk up that first time they knock on the door and hand them a citation. There's always conversation. There's always an opportunity to work it out. Because as we said, it's actually less work if they can do that, as opposed to having to take it through the process. So I know that they try to do that every time. So I'm not concerned about the individual homeowner. I think we don't have huge problems. And then when we do have a problem, we've got the teeth to handle it. I think where I'm more concerned is, and Mr. Lewis has said this repeatedly, is with the landlords, because this covers them too. And they're the ones that have the money to put up the fight, to extend the issue to the absolute maximum before they're forced to do something. And we know landlords we have that do that. So we need teeth and something that's going to get their attention and not allow that process to just be continued, to be extended on and on and on, with them not having to alleviate the problem for the tenants who are the ones who we're the most concerned about. So again, I don't think the fee is prohibitive. I don't think it cuts down on communication. It certainly isn't designed for that. And I think that I agree with Mr. Wise that the code as it is, it works. It's been true. It's been tried. It's been tested. And down the road, if we see individual problems, then we can make adjustments. But going in ahead of time and making adjustments for things that might happen or that we're concerned could be a problem, I don't think it is a good use of our time, and I don't think it's good for our residents.
If I may, just to clarify, and I know this was not your intention, the code does apply to everyone. And it's not just to go after big landlords. It applies to everyone, but the tiering of the potential sanctions, if someone's a homeowner, the $250 fine is going to get their attention, and the incentive is to fix that up initially. Where if someone who has a number of locations or just blows it off and doesn't care, then as it tiers up and it gets to be more expensive, that then gets their attention. It's not the enforcement, because the enforcement has to be, of course, with discretion, but the enforcement is for all properties. It's just the level of, for lack of a better word, attention or the sanction. So.
Councilman Markham?
Thank you. So I've had the opportunity in the past to both prosecute these cases criminally and also pursue these folks civilly. Now, personally, I will choose the administrative route all day, every day, as long as our system has a robust administrative system in there. I mean, these folks are owed due process, notice, hey, you're in violation, this is what you're in violation of, and then the right to be heard, the conversation with the inspector, and then the right to appeal, which can be conditioned on that $100 fine. They come to a city board, they have their appeal heard, And if they still disagree with whatever that decision is, they can file a appeal under Chapter 2506 to the Court of Common Pleas, and we find ourselves in court litigating whether or not a violation existed. I can get on board with removing the criminal penalty here because having prosecuted these cases, one, I had to prosecute an old lady once, and that was terrible. But two, these prosecutions are much tougher than they appear at first blush. Oftentimes, the landlords win because either they run their tenants off, their tenants don't show up to court, this, that, or the other. I mean, the loss rate on a criminal trial is a lot higher than our loss rate administratively. So I do agree, if we want to go after these folks who just habitually do not keep their property up, having a robust administrative system in place, an administrative procedure, that's the word I was looking for, in place to fine these folks and then assess these folks to their property, these fines to their property taxes, or even declare their property a nuisance. And then when they fail to abate the nuisance, the city steps in and abates the nuisance and then assesses the cost of that abatement to their property taxes. And if we're levying fines daily on the most problematic properties, that's $250 a day, $500 a day, $500 a day. It quickly gets to that $25,000 number. And somebody who just does not care about their property is stuck with those administrative fines because they had the right to be heard, waived that right to be heard, and now they owe the city $25,000. The city can either assess it to their tax, losing my words here, but assess it to the property taxes and the county can foreclose, or depending on, I'm not sure how robust our administrative procedures here are, the city could actually step in and foreclose on the property due to the fines and dispose of the property one way or another, recoup its costs, and hopefully whoever buys that property at a sheriff's sale or whatever mechanism to dispose of that property and recoup the costs is, hopefully whoever the future landlord is or property owner is a much better individual than the person that ignored the city for probably a year by the time it gets that bad. So I can get on board with potentially waiving any criminal penalties. I'm iffy on the $100 appeal because it's low, but for some folks I can't see how it could be problematic. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gregg, I think you mentioned it before. If they do prevail in the appeal, they get that $100 fee back.
Yes.
And I think in a 2506 appeal, so let's say they lose again, they have to go to court. If they're appealing under 2506, I think they would still get their fees back and maybe attorney's fees, but I don't remember 100%. I don't think it's like a 1983 action where
It's not
1988 kicks it.
I don't recall exactly, but yeah.
Normally, it gets worked out before that because everybody's
Yes.
scrambling. Because
Yes.
that's a lot of litigating.
Yes, it is.
Anybody else? All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
That's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. Parks and Recreation, Mrs. Hardwick Smith.
I have nothing for Park and Recs tonight.
Police and Fire, Councilman Markham.
I do not believe I have anything tonight.
Public Utilities and Environmental, Mrs. Hyam Brian Huth.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
I have Rules and Courts, nothing for Rules and Courts this evening. Streets, Highways, Traffic Safety, Mrs. Creamer, Mrs. Cunningham, since Mr. Packley's not here. Is there anything?
Not to my
Okay.
knowledge.
And finally, Finance would be me in Mr. Lewis's absence, and we have nothing either. So if there is no further discussion, I would say we can adjourn. Thank you.